Welcome to the Roy Morgan Quarterly Update. I'll discuss the new rankings in brand trust and distrust in Australia shortly, but first I have breaking news. I can reveal that after 3 years as the most trusted brand in Australia, Woolworths has dropped 32 places, and after 3 years as the nation's second most trusted brand, Coles has plummeted 221 positions to become one of the most distrusted brands in the country. But more on that later. Trust acts as a stabilising force in a fractured world, fostering collaboration, resilience, and social cohesion. It bridges divides, enabling individuals and organisations to navigate uncertainty and complex challenges with confidence and shared purpose. In the corporate world, trust is the invisible currency that underpins every successful enterprise. While tangible assets might define a company's immediate value, it's trust and reputation that sustain long-term growth and resilience. Trust is our most enduring asset. As Mark Benioff, the global CEO of Salesforce, famously says, trust has to be the highest value in your company. And if it's not, something very bad is going to happen to you. Deloitte in the US found that trusted companies outperformed non-trusted brands by 2.5 times, with 88% of customers who highly trust a brand more likely to buy again from it. Crucially, distrust is not merely an absence of trust. Distrust stretches relationships to breaking point, creating a toxic environment that destroys collaboration and innovation. It breeds suspicion and anxiety, leading to inefficiency and conflict. And it has a material impact. Take Medibank. Immediately following a single catastrophic data breach in late 2022, Medibank's soaring levels of distrust wiped close to $2 billion off its market value in a single day. So how do we measure trust and distrust? Since late 2017, Roy Morgan has continuously surveyed around 2,000 Australians each month through our risk monitor. We ask about which brands they trust and which they distrust. Crucially, we ask why they trust or distrust the brands they nominate, and we record exactly what they say. Net scores are calculated by subtracting distrust from trust. And this provides a full picture of how a brand is tracking and allows us to benchmark it against all other brands. This quantified qualitative research is unique, open-ended, unprompted, and completely context-free. While pretty much everyone measures trust, only Roy Morgan measures distrust. Now let's look at trust and distrust in action. This slide shows key industry sectors' net trust and net distrust rankings. We roll up every mention of a brand into an aggregated industry sector and then report on that. For instance, last quarter I flagged that supermarkets' goodwill was being eroded by cost of living anxiety and customer antagonism. And, as foreshadowed, the supermarket sector is the biggest loser this quarter. The soaring distrust of Coles and Woolworths that I just revealed has caused the sector to drop 2 places in the industry rankings. Utilities, banks and insurance sectors have also worsened, while consumer products rose by 2 rankings and charities moved up 1 place. But what's happening with individual brand winners and losers? In a new feature of our quarterly webinars, I'll announce the biggest improvers and deteriorators before examining the top 20 most trusted and most distrusted brands. First, the top line improvers. Among brands with net trust scores, Cotton On, Nintendo and Yui all enjoyed a significant lift in their trust scores, which was reflected in their rankings. But what about the deteriorators? As announced earlier, Coles suffered the biggest drop, plummeting 221 trust rankings, and Woolworths fell 32 places. In fact, Coles has fallen so far that has gone from being a trusted brand to becoming Australia's 9th most distrusted brand. Allianz was another trusted brand with a large deterioration in rankings, largely due to perceptions of greed and being too motivated by profit. And speaking of distrust, who has improved among the distrusted group? Well, improvers among distrusted brands were Bravus, that's the new name for the controversial miner Adani, which improved 12 places in the distrust stakes. Given that Bravus Adani has no trust at all, this is solely due to Bravus not being known and Adani fading from sight. However, it does point to a name change being a useful strategy in the face of overwhelming distrust and reputational damage. Coca-Cola enjoyed a lift in trust, even though it's still more distrusted than trusted. Now, among the distrusted brands whose rankings fell, NAB suffered a dramatic deterioration, worsening its distrust ranking by 42 places. This deterioration is due to escalating distrust, largely because NAB is now seen as greedy, too motivated by profit, and charging rip-off fees. BHP deteriorated 20 places, and controversial online Chinese retail brand Temu is continuing its descent further into distrusted brand territory. Now let's look at the top 20 winners and losers. First, Australia's most trusted brands. In the top 20, Bunnings again takes top spot as the nation's most trusted brand. Woolworths and Coles' dramatic exit from the top 20 most trusted list lifted almost everyone else. What's interesting is that Bendigo Bank has further widened its trust gap with ING, and Australia Post is staging a recovery, jumping 4 places. Commonwealth Bank also improved its position in stark contrast to NAB. Looking at the net trust score trends for the top 3 most trusted brands, Bunnings remains consistently ahead of Aldi and Kmart. All 3 improved from late 2022 as a series of economic downturns impacted the cost of living for many Australians. However, due to a decrease in trust, Kmart is in decline. This is largely due to fewer Australians saying that Kmart delivers affordable prices, good quality products, and a customer-focused experience. It may be that the baseline for affordable prices has actually changed with the entry of deep discounters like Temu and Shein. So that's trust. But what's happening with the most distrusted brands? After its catastrophic data breach in late 2022, Optus can't shake off its unenviable role as Australia's most distrusted brand. We're often asked what the recovery rate is after a major brand shock like data hacks or royal commissions. And Optus is providing some clues. We're at 20 months and counting. Facebook at number 2 is the beneficiary of Optus's inability to make any of its recovery tactics stick. Medibank, on the other hand, is showing real signs of recovery and is now out of the top 10 most distrusted brands. Now, every quarter I choose a different focus, and in this webinar, my focus is on the role distrust is playing in taking Australia down the path of national fragility. Alan Renouf, a former Australian diplomat, used the phrase "a frightened and intimidated nation" to describe an Australian mindset characterised by fear and subservience rather than confidence and independence. Fear and subservience generate distrust, which in turn contributes to Australia becoming a fragile nation. More than 100 years ago, US President Theodore Roosevelt spoke to the American people about corporate power acting as an unelected government, not accountable to the people standing behind the elected government and influencing decisions that were not in the best interests of the people. In Australia today, we have parallels, with moral blindness being exhibited by leaders at Facebook, Qantas, Harvey Norman, PWC, AMP, several banks, Rio Tinto, and others. and by many government services becoming privatised and corporatised, producing a focus on profits and price. We tend to forget that many deeply distrusted institutions like Qantas, Telstra, Medibank, and the privatised energy and water utilities were once government services. This is important because governments and government-related services have been more distrusted than trusted for as long as we've been measuring trust and distrust. Just look at the net distrust dotted black line that was improving until late 2020 before a steady increase in distrust pushed the net distrust score into record distrust territory this year. It's interesting that since the onset of COVID, Australia has become a different country, a more aggressive, anarchic, and dramatically distrusting nation. Most Australians, for example, think that the country's going in the wrong direction. So COVID made us more fragile. But when it finished, we didn't bounce back. And many corporate executives and national leaders who were able to take inappropriate shortcuts under cover of the pandemic clearly got a taste for it. Then they went right on behaving appallingly, even corruptly, even when their behaviour was exposed. At the risk of being accused of Qantas bashing, under the control of the previous CEO, Qantas provides a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And that collective poor behaviour at corporate and government leadership levels has led to the entire economy becoming more distrusted than trusted, contributing to us becoming a fragile nation. But what's worrying us? Reasons why Australians distrust corporate Australia and corporatised public services include huge profits, the top line, lack of customer focus, the second green line, and price gouging, the red line. All three reasons continue to rise, mainly because while many business leaders immediately recognised COVID-19 as a crisis, they failed to recognise inflation, rate increases, and cost of living pressures as a full-blown social and economic crisis. Triumphant corporate profit declarations, perceived as tone deaf, further alienate Australians, leading to a significant worsening of distrust. Remember that distrust is not an absence of trust, but an active scepticism that leaders are prioritising prices and profits over people. Let's take a closer look at profits. So looking at profits through the lens of net distrust, the red columns, we can see how distrust skyrocketed. Firstly, at the onset of COVID, when people saw businesses accepting JobKeeper while still making massive profits. And then again during the current cost of living crisis, as corporations continued to make record profits while consumers were struggling to pay their mortgage and even put food on the table. Another major cause of national distrust is privacy concerns, which have continued to grow dramatically since late 2022, following several high-profile data breaches. Our data at Roy Morgan shows that privacy is a significant factor in Australians' decisions about which organisations they trust or distrust. As shown on the graph, there's a direct correlation between data privacy breaches and Australians becoming more distrustful, contributing to a growing national fragility. It's clear, therefore, that trust can be lost in an instant, often due to a single misstep or breach of integrity, and rebuilding it can take years of consistent effort. This fragility makes maintaining trust and controlling distrust a continuous priority. As I've been saying for the best part of a decade, every corporate board should have distrust on its risk register. Let's look at examples of how quickly trust can be lost and replaced by toxic distrust. Woolworths and Coles starkly reveal how quickly distrust can gain momentum and negatively impact a brand's reputation. There's an old Dutch saying that trust arrives on foot, but leaves on horseback. In other words, trust is slow to win, but quick to lose. But this isn't just PR. Woolworths' market capitalisation dropped 21% over the past 12 months, wiping $6.6 billion of its capital value. Coles' share price over the same period suffered a 21% fall from high to low. And I'm afraid there's even worse news for the major supermarket brands that's yet to come. Back then to Qantas. Just a couple of years ago, Qantas was one of the most trusted brands in the country, but now it's the third most distrusted brand in Australia. In the 18 months to September last year, Qantas fell 185 rankings, with most of the blame being sheeted home to outgoing CEO Alan Joyce. There were narratives of appalling call centre delays, cancelled flights, snail's pace fare refunds, to a leader turning a blind eye to the anguish of tens of thousands of once trusting customers. But one of the most damaging narratives was Alan Joyce refusing to pay back any of the $2 billion in government welfare, including JobKeeper, during the pandemic, despite the company surging back to billion-dollar profitability. Well, was there any material impact? Qantas's market capitalisation dropped 35% over the past 12 months, wiping off $3.47 billion from its capital value. Its recovery rate, like those of Medibank, Optus, Rio Tinto, and so many more, is slow and painful. I'll wrap up this session with an observation on reputation recovery rates. Narrative economics, developed by Nobel laureate Robert Shiller, explores how the power of stories and shared narratives influence economic behaviour. Organisations can reshape public perception, reduce distrust, and accelerate the recovery rate by controlling the narratives and the storytelling channels. After all, the economy is really just a set of stories we tell each other and ourselves. So to conclude, narratives drive attitudes and attitudes drive behaviour. So influence your distrusters with the right narratives at the right place at the right time, and you might halve the time it takes your organisation to recover. We'll explore this more in upcoming webinars. And that's a wrap for another quarter. Join me next time for our end of financial year report and forecast for the coming 12 months. Nine Network's National Finance Editor Chris Kohler will give us his predictions for the new financial year. In the meantime, subscribe to our YouTube channel for a whole range of these and other Roy Morgan data and insights, or contact Ask Roy Morgan at Roy Morgan. And look out for our upcoming Farmer Agribusiness Brand Trust Survey. Thank you for joining me today. See you next time.